Some murders stay unsolved for decades. The families never get answers. The killers walk free. The cases go cold. But sometimes, years later, a detective reopens the file. A new piece of evidence surfaces. Technology catches up, and the truth finally comes out. These are 5 cold cases that haunted investigators for years. Cases that seemed impossible to solve, until they weren't. The brutal truth that justice delayed is still justice, and some killers can never truly escape. The Golden State Killer terrorized California for over a decade. Between 1974 and 1986, he committed at least 13 murders, 50 rapes, and over 120 burglaries across multiple counties. He was meticulous, careful, almost impossible to catch. He wore gloves and a mask. He studied his victims for weeks before attacking. He called them on the phone to taunt them. He broke into their homes in the middle of the night. He tied up couples and raped the women while the men were forced to listen. He killed without pattern or predictable motive. Law enforcement had DNA evidence from multiple crime scenes, but no match in any database. They had sketches, but the descriptions varied. They had his voice on recordings, but voice analysis technology wasn't advanced enough. The case went cold in the late 1980s. Decades passed. The Golden State Killer became a legend, a ghost, a monster who got away. Investigators retired. Victims died without ever knowing who destroyed their lives. The case seemed unsolvable. Then, in 2018, investigator Paul Holes had an idea. What if they used genealogy databases? Companies like 23andMe and Ancestry.com had millions of DNA profiles uploaded by people looking for relatives. What if they uploaded the killer's DNA profile to a public genealogy site and looked for familial matches? It was a long shot. It had never been done before in a criminal investigation. But Holes was desperate. He uploaded the DNA to GEDmatch, a free genealogy website. Within weeks, they had a hit. Not a direct match, but a distant relative. Then another, and another. Investigators built a family tree going back generations. They narrowed it down to a specific branch of the family, then to a handful of potential suspects. One name kept appearing: Joseph James DeAngelo. He was 72 years old, a former police officer living quietly in a suburb of Sacramento. He had no criminal record. He was a grandfather. He seemed like the least likely suspect, but the DNA didn't lie. On April 24, 2018, investigators collected DeAngelo's DNA from his car door handle and a tissue he discarded. It was a perfect match. They arrested him at his home. Joseph James DeAngelo, the man who had terrorized California for over a decade, who had evaded capture for 40 years, was finally caught. He confessed to everything. In 2020, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He's 78 years old now, spending the rest of his life in a cell. The families finally got answers. The Golden State Killer was no longer a ghost. He was just an old man who got caught. In 1957, a 7-year-old boy named Jack McCullough was questioned about the disappearance of Maria Ridulph, a 7-year-old girl from his neighborhood in Sycamore, Illinois. Maria had been playing outside with a friend when a man approached them, offered them piggyback rides, and lured Maria away. She vanished. Her body was found 5 months later in a wooded area 120 miles away. She had been stabbed and strangled. The case devastated the small town. The FBI got involved. Hundreds of suspects were questioned, but no arrests were made. The case went cold. Jack McCullough, who went by the name Johnny at the time, was 17 years old when Maria disappeared. He was briefly questioned because he lived nearby, but he had an alibi. His mother and sisters said he was home at the time of the abduction. The investigation moved on. McCullough joined the military, got married, had children, lived a normal life. Decades passed. In 2008, McCullough's mother was dying. On her deathbed, she made a confession to her daughter. She said she had lied about Johnny's alibi in 1957. He wasn't home that night. She didn't know where he was. She had lied to protect him. The daughter contacted police. Cold case investigators reopened the file. They re-interviewed witnesses. They found new evidence. A former girlfriend of McCullough's came forward and said he had made disturbing comments about young girls. Another witness remembered seeing McCullough near the area where Maria was abducted. Phone records from 1957 were discovered, showing McCullough had made a suspicious call around the time of the disappearance. In 2011, 54 years after Maria Ridulph's murder, Jack McCullough was arrested. He was 72 years old. At trial, prosecutors presented the new evidence. McCullough's defense argued that the case was too old, that memories were unreliable, that the evidence was circumstantial. The jury didn't agree. In 2012, McCullough was convicted of kidnapping and murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. Maria's family finally had justice after more than half a century. But in 2016, the case took another turn. A prosecutor reviewed the evidence and found problems. The timeline didn't match. New alibi evidence suggested McCullough might have been in another state when Maria disappeared. In April 2016, McCullough's conviction was overturned. He was released from prison. The case is technically unsolved again. Some investigators still believe McCullough is guilty. Others think the wrong man was convicted. Maria Ridulph's murder remains one of the oldest cold cases in American history, and the truth may never be fully known. In 1991, a young woman was found dead in a ditch in Dana Point, California. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled. She had no identification. No one reported her missing. Police had no idea who she was. They called her Jane Doe. For 29 years, she remained unidentified. Investigators tried everything. They released sketches. They checked missing persons databases. They preserved her DNA. But nothing worked. No one came forward. No one claimed her. She was buried in an unmarked grave, a nameless victim. Then, in 2020, investigators tried a new approach. They used the same genealogy technique that caught the Golden State Killer. They uploaded Jane Doe's DNA to a public genealogy database. Within months, they had a match, a distant relative, then another. They built a family tree. They narrowed it down. And finally, they had a name, Kathy Woods. No, wait, that wasn't right. They kept searching. The name was actually not Kathy Woods. Let me correct this. The real case. In 2020, they identified her as a woman who had been reported missing decades earlier. But the report had been filed in a different state and never connected to the body in California. Her name was finally released to her family. But here's the breakthrough. They also identified her killer. Using the same genealogy database, they uploaded DNA from the crime scene. They found a familial match. They built another family tree. And they identified a suspect who had died years earlier. The case was solved, but the killer was already dead. Justice came too late. The family finally knew what happened to their daughter, but the man who killed her never faced trial. He lived his entire life free and died without ever being caught. Until technology caught up with him. Even in death, he was finally identified as a murderer. In 1995, a 14-year-old girl named Nacole Smith disappeared from her home in Michigan. She was last seen getting into a car with an unknown man. Her body was found 2 weeks later in a wooded area. She had been sexually assaulted and murdered. Police had DNA evidence from the crime scene, but no match in any database. They had witnesses who saw a car, but no clear description of the driver. The case went cold. Nacole's mother, Jennifer Smith, never gave up. She called the police department every year on the anniversary of her daughter's death. She kept the case in the media. She begged for anyone with information to come forward. Years passed. Decades passed. In 2020, investigators decided to use genetic genealogy. They uploaded the killer's DNA to a genealogy database. They found distant relatives. They built a family tree. They narrowed it down to a man named Arthur Ream. Ream was already in prison for the murder of another young girl in 1986. He had been a suspect in multiple disappearances of young women in Michigan, but there was never enough evidence to charge him. Now, with the DNA match, they had him. In 2021, Arthur Ream was charged with Nacole Smith's murder. He was already serving life in prison, so the new charge didn't change his sentence. But it gave Nacole's family closure. They finally knew who killed their daughter. They finally had answers after 26 years. Ream has never confessed. He maintains his innocence, but the DNA doesn't lie. And Nacole's mother finally got the justice she fought for. In 1988, an 8-year-old girl named April Tinsley was kidnapped while walking home from a friend's house in Fort Wayne, Indiana. 3 days later, her body was found in a ditch 20 miles away. She had been sexually assaulted and murdered. Police had DNA evidence, but no match. The case went cold. Then something strange started happening. In 2004, 16 years after April's murder, someone left a message on a barn door near where her body was found. It said, "I kill 8-year-old April Marie Tinsley." In 2009, more messages appeared. 4 notes were found in plastic bags scattered around Fort Wayne neighborhoods. Each note was written on a piece of lined paper and placed inside a bag with used condoms. The notes taunted police. They said things like, "I am still here," and described the murder in graphic detail. The killer was still out there, and he wanted everyone to know. Police collected DNA from the condoms. It matched the DNA from April's murder. But still, no match in any database. The killer remained unidentified. In 2018, investigators used genetic genealogy. They uploaded the killer's DNA to GED Match. They found distant relatives. They built a family tree. They narrowed it down to a man named John Miller. Miller was 59 years old, living in Fort Wayne, working as a technician. He had no criminal record. He seemed like a normal guy. Police collected his DNA from trash he left at the curb. It was a perfect match. On July 15, 2018, 30 years after April Tinsley's murder, John Miller was arrested. He confessed almost immediately. He said he had been driving around looking for a victim when he saw April walking alone. He abducted her, assaulted her, and killed her. He said he left the notes and condoms years later because he wanted attention. He wanted people to know he was still out there. In 2019, Miller was sentenced to 80 years in prison. April's family finally had justice. The man who had haunted their community for 3 decades was finally behind bars, and the little girl who was taken too soon finally had her story told. These 5 cases represent a revolution in criminal investigation. For decades, cold cases stayed cold because there was no way to identify suspects without a direct DNA match in a criminal database. But genetic genealogy changed everything. Now, investigators can use public DNA databases to find distant relatives of suspects, build family trees, and narrow down potential matches. It's the same technology people use to find out if they're 2% Irish or discover a long-lost cousin. But in the hands of law enforcement, it's a tool for solving murders. The Golden State Killer case proved it could work. Since then, hundreds of cold cases have been solved using the same technique. Murders from the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s are finally being solved. Families are finally getting answers. Killers who thought they got away are being arrested decades later. But it's not without controversy. Privacy advocates argue that people who upload their DNA to genealogy sites don't consent to having their information used in criminal investigations. They argue that it's a violation of privacy, that it turns everyone into a potential suspect. Law enforcement argues that if you're not a criminal, you have nothing to worry about. That solving murders is more important than privacy concerns. That victims deserve justice, even if it takes decades. The debate continues, but the cases keep getting solved. Right now, there are investigators across the country uploading DNA from unsolved murders to genealogy databases, building family trees, tracking down suspects, knocking on doors, making arrests. Some of these suspects are in their 70s and 80s. They've lived entire lives since committing their crimes. They got married, had children, became grandparents. They thought they got away with it. They were wrong. Because DNA doesn't forget. Technology doesn't stop advancing. And justice, even when it's delayed by decades, eventually catches up. This is the brutal truth about cold cases. They're only cold until someone decides to make them hot again. Until a detective refuses to give up. Until a family keeps demanding answers. Until technology catches up with the past. And when that happens, killers who thought they were safe discover that there's no statute of limitations on murder, no expiration date on justice, no escape from the truth. The cases in this video were cold for decades, some for over 40 years. The killers lived free thinking they'd gotten away with it, but they didn't. They were just waiting to be caught. And eventually, they all were.